So I didn't have as much opportunity to see how he looked in person, his style, until 1 month in when he came in person. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different than I imagined.
Better?
No.
You've experienced something, but you haven't really experienced the beauty of marriage and covenant. Waking up to someone in that morning, and you know because of a promise they made, they're not going anywhere.
If we think they have to be a 10 out of 10
Yes.
in every area, like what's really the benefit of you getting married?
The biggest piece I think that's missing in today's culture is
Welcome back to the Dear Future Husband podcast. And you may be thinking, wait, I'm confused. I see Kait and JJ. I thought this was the heart of dating. Here's the thing. We both have Christian dating podcasts.
Yeah.
And we thought, how fun would it be to actually get together and talk about like what we've seen work for us in our relationships, the advice we give, and see, is there actually like a one-way formula, or is there some like creativity and nuance within Christian dating?
I love it. We're going to get into it today, Christian. Let's do this.
Well, I thought this was like the battle of the two, and then whoever wins this kind of podcast.
The other one has to delete their channel. All right, that'll be it.
We just merged into one.
Comment below who wins this debate.
Oh my goodness.
No, we were just joking too before we started recording. It's so fun to have these conversations with friends.
Yeah.
Because it's like you could have your best friend have a completely different love story than yours.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean one's better, one was wrong. It's just there is so much that I believe like God speaks to us individually. And it's really, not to point to your show again, but like what is the heart of what we're doing and how we're connecting.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
before we jump into the sparring, as JJ says, I want to introduce you guys a little bit more for the people that don't know you. So Kait and JJ, how did you meet? What do y'all do? Give us a glimpse into your life.
Do you want to start?
No, you got it.
All right. So I've done the Heart of Dating for the last 7 years, and I started it single, which is kind of, I think, an important thing for people to know because I was just kind of navigating this whole journey of singleness alongside all the other singles, wondering how in the world do we do this in a healthy way when there's not a lot out there on how to date well as a Christian, as you know. And so I started 7 years ago, didn't want to. There's a whole story there, but I did. I felt the Lord was calling me to it. Actually, really funny moment. Okay, so I emailed Lisa, your mother-in-law, out of the blue. Never met her and didn't know her at the time. And this is like a God moment because I emailed her and she probably was on the go or something because she responded from her iPhone.
Yeah.
And she was like, Kait, this is awesome. I love it. You need to connect with my sons. And then that's how I ended up meeting Arden and Alec and Addison and they've all been on the show. And so
I saw the first episode when we were dating and then I was like, I have to see the comments. Like, are there the girls like, I dated him. He's
So
okay.
I'm pretty sure when I interviewed Arden is like either right around when you guys met or something.
Yes.
It was like the timing.
We weren't
of
like dating, but he's like, yeah, I'm single. And I was like, you are not.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
Yes. And then of course Alec was like the last Bevere standing single because didn't Austin get engaged right after that? And it was so funny. But anyway, so did that for a few years. And then in 2021, that's when I met you. And JJ, the way we met was really funny. I was speaking at a single girls virtual event. Okay. So a Galentine's event in COVID. It was still COVID-ish time frame, right? And it was 500 single girls on a Zoom. And JJ was there as well. Why were you there, JJ?
I was really wrestling with, no, I'm just kidding. Me and a couple other guys were bachelors doing blind dates at the beginning as like icebreaker calls.
Like a live blind date. These 500 girls can apply to go on a live blind date.
Delight Ministries. It's Kenzie and Mac in Nashville. I knew them prior to this, and they invited me and a couple other guys to just do blind dates. And Kait was not my blind date. We met on the pre-call. I saw her like 4x6 pixels, and I was like, who's this? Like, ooh la la. And she didn't notice me, of course. So even
I was locked in. I was like thinking about my talk. I was not thinking about
That's why he liked you.
Yeah, exactly. So I went on my date. Kait obviously did not watch it. She was just prepping for her talk.
Yeah, I was just camera off.
Yeah. And then they just invited the guys to stay on and watch her, speak. And I was like, well, obviously I'm not going to be the only guy here. So I changed my name to like Emily or something and turn off my camera. You know?
Pretend to be a girl.
I-
What would be
How
funny is if your
romantic.
image, when you turn off your camera, if it was still like a guy, but
Yeah,
it was like
it was
Emily.
Emily.
I don't know.
That would have been awkward, yeah. So then I watched her because if I was as beautiful as she was, if I had just seen her and not really knew her or knew her character, I still would not have asked her out. So after I saw her talk for 45 minutes on self-hatred, rejection, healing, and God, like her story, that's really what piqued my spirit and curiosity in my heart towards her. So naturally, I followed up with the organizers to get set up, and they're like, for sure, yes. And then they put it in front of Kate, and she was, I don't know, what would you say?
I was immediate, yes.
Ecstatic?
No, I didn't say no. I said, what's his Instagram? And who is this guy? Because I just remember the guys there being young. He is younger than me. That's one big deal about our story is he's 5.5 years younger. So there's a big age gap. Usually you don't see it that way where the girl's older. I mean, it happens, but usually it's the other way. And so, yeah, that part of our journey is he wasn't my quote type for many reasons. And we talk about that a lot because he had blue hair and black earrings, and he had the most interesting style. What was your style?
Very cool. Very cool style.
Obviously.
Yeah,
We're here
exactly.
today.
Yeah. It was
Very
very
cool.
cool. But no, so we did long distance. We dated. I actually had to move down to Orange County in Southern California
Where
for
I
my new
was,
job
yeah.
anyway. So it worked out really well in that sense. I was able to move and pursue her, and for my work, it was kind of like for work, but mainly for her. And then it worked out pretty well from there. So, but huge believers in just challenging type based off that story. Huge believers in just taking it one date at a time. I was super excited to get to know Kate. And for me in my heart, I had to really calm down and say, all right, God's got this. I'm just going to take this one date at a time. And for Kate, it was the same advice. Let's just take this one date at a time because I'm not that interested in this guy. But let me just one date at a time, see if something happens. And God used it.
Yeah, something happened.
Yeah.
All right, I feel like there's already like little
Yes.
questions we could be asking, but okay, so your type, we're hearing it doesn't necessarily have to be what you thought it would be. I agree with that because
Yeah.
sometimes I think we get in our own head or we watch all the romance movies or
Exactly.
we build a type based off unhealed things within ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we would agree
Yes.
that challenge the type, but
Yes.
our story is a little different and we did the whole like DM thing, which I
That's
guess
right.
is similar to the pixel photo. But we knew, I think on our first date, like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, this is the one. So
Yeah.
if someone's like, I'm in between these two areas, how do I know when, okay, I tried, but I'm just not feeling it. I don't want to force attraction. How many dates did it take for, I guess, more so you to think, oh, this is something I'm uncovering? And when did your style kind of change too?
Yeah. And on that
Was it
note-
like she was tapping out and you're like, wait, hold on. Dye my hair.
Fix this. Yeah, for me, I think our story is unique in that it was long distance. So we weren't doing dates in person. I think, so I didn't have as much opportunity to see how he looked in person, his style, until 1 month in when he came in person for the first time to visit. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different than
Yeah.
I imagined. No, worse. That's worse. So, and after that, so that was 30 days in. After that weekend, he came to visit. I really had to be tested. Honestly, our challenge, a friend of mine was like, hey, you just told me you had the best weekend with this guy. He has great character. You had so much fun, so many things and values align. And yet you're telling me you're being held up because you're not sure if you're like attracted to him physically. Yet I didn't think he was ugly. Okay. A lot of people think I've said on the internet that he's ugly. Definitely have never said that, but I wasn't physically as into him because mainly superficial things like attraction, because of his style. And so when you're talking about how long, for me, it took about 45, 60 days until I really felt more physically attracted. And I think what we actually just recorded an episode on this. So with attraction, there's 5 different levels. There's not just the physical. There's the emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and personality. And you'll find, even if you see someone and you're like 5 out of 5 attraction, like they are so attractive, if physically, if the other buckets are empty or like 1, you're not going to actually be attracted to them in the long run. So with JJ, those other buckets that I just mentioned were there. It was just the physical was more at like a 3 to begin with. And I do think if physical is at a 0.
3 out of 5.
Yeah.
I was wondering. I was
Sorry,
like,
not out of 10. Sorry, 3 out of 5.
are we 30 or like 55%?
3 out of 10, 30%.
That'd be tough.
No, we say there needs to be a 70% attraction, like moderate level of attraction there. And sometimes in the beginning, it might start off a little bit less, but if that doesn't grow through 30 days, a few dates, then I would say yes, end it with the person. But there's all those other factors. Like I'm like, stay in it if it's like a 3 out of 5 attraction, 70%. If you have emotional, spiritual, especially if there's something there and that's really strong, the physical totally can grow, at least in our opinion. And scientifically, that's been more proven. What do you think about us saying that?
No, I totally agree. And I
Yeah.
think like attraction, we do just think it has to be like this, oh my gosh, I'm like
Yes.
sweating, looking at you type of attraction.
exactly.
But first of all, if it's only that type of physical attraction of like, oh my gosh, I need to
Yes.
be alone with you rather than, man, I can stare into your eyes. Like I feel even physical, I think is diluted a lot, but there are all the other areas. And
Yeah.
I think just super practically too, there's something to the essence of when you get into a marriage, you partner and build each other so many ways. And let's be real, sometimes that is, okay, a woman helps a man find his style.
Yes.
My husband helps me find my voice. Like
Yeah.
there's things where it's like, okay, if we think they have to be a 10 out of 10
Yes.
in every area, like what's really the benefit of you getting married?
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
you're supposed to sharpen each other, help each other get better. So
Totally. Yeah.
you know, maybe you're like, oh man, I love looking to his eyes and talking to him. Maybe this could change. Awesome. You don't
Yeah.
have to like fix him, but it's
Yeah.
like, what are the areas we're still going to grow together?
Yes,
Like you're saying,
exactly.
that we need to start strong, not settle, but leave some room to grow.
And I think it's the important
Are you
thing.
taking credit for Arden's style now?
absolutely.
Because he is always neutral colors, really nice pastels. He's got a nice hat.
Thank you. Yeah, he would call me his stylist. But the thing with Arden too is he doesn't realize how attractive he is. We're like, we go to Italy. We've gone once. I'm like, we go to Italy every summer.
I'm like, nice.
Or like we go somewhere and people look at him. He's like, why aren't people looking at me? I'm like, because you're an attractive guy. You could pull off more
So
clothes than
humble.
you allow yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's kind of the opposite. He didn't have bad style. He just wouldn't try things. I'm like, you can't have all this goodness. And
Yeah, you got to take advantage
You're
of
like,
it,
Yeah.
this is
man.
criminal.
if I had your eyelashes, you know, it's fine.
But actually, can I bring up something? So with knowing right away if someone's the one, I do think you do hear stories like y'all's where you're like, oh, we knew right away that this was going to work. Or our friends Janine and Caleb, they saw each other, they knew. I would say, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, like sometimes that's infatuation scientifically. So I do think we have to be careful because not that we can't know right away that we might be with this person, but I do think there's that level of scientifically, chemically, infatuation is really strong. I've seen couples that are like, this person's the one. And even though I'm seeing red flags, people that I coach, I'm like, they're so into it and they're saying it's the one, they feel like God's telling them, but it's pure infatuation. And there actually is a lot of red flags, but they're overlooking that because they're like, I knew from the beginning and God told me, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
And so they like keep going and then it ends. And it's like,
ends.
oh, it's just so heartbreaking. So I feel like it's like that both stories can happen and there is a reality of, hey, is this infatuation or not?
No, that's so true. And I think anything either one of us says on any platform is like, take this with a grain of salt
Yeah.
and to God, because I mean, there's so much that you have to know yourself and
Yeah.
feel that peace to continue on, or else it just, you know, it might not work for you. But infatuation for me, I was at the point before I met Arden where I was like, God, I cannot date someone else until it's my future husband. Not to be legalistic or like, I need this right now. But I was like, I don't trust myself because I have been in the stages of infatuation or in the small groups where the pastor's like, find someone that's cute and, you know, you'll make a great couple. I'm like, is it really that simple? Like, I don't think so. Then we could just be trading, you know, partners and it all would have worked out. I think there's uniqueness to it. But Yeah, I think you have to have really keen eyes and get real about yourself. I know we've talked about this in other episodes we've done, but it's like, how honest are you with yourself, and how like loose gripped, as excited as you are you with this relationship? I actually think long distance did well for us.
Right. Yeah. You guys were long
Because
distance
it
too.
makes you think, okay, that was a great date, but now I have to sit and think on it. I can't just like bypass red flags because I'm excited to go out with him again in 2 days.
Right.
Like, you actually have more time for evaluation, which is something I'm like, if I was to give a blanket statement for anyone dating, is like, have more time for evaluation, more people speaking into it.
Yeah.
So you can't get as infatuated easy. I don't know if y'all have had stories or advice you share on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great segue for timelines. You know, and I think this is all pointing to the ultimate answer, which is wisdom. Wisdom is basically when the rules don't apply. I mean, the Bible does have very clear advice or instruction on this. What does wisdom say?
Right.
Choosing a spouse, I think, requires the most wisdom. It's the second most important decision in your whole entire life. So you need a lot of wisdom. And wisdom is basically when the rules don't apply, how can I make a great decision here? And without having to go through the pain of maybe learning that experience the hard way. And so learning the wisdom of making a good decision, I think you hear great stories and of how it worked out well, like your story, John's story that he just shared about with Lisa, hearing God's voice and wanting that for yourself. You also need to hear the negative stories, the stories where it didn't work out well, the stories where someone thought they heard from God, but really it was just their heart. You know, they gave their way, their heart too soon, without counsel, without wise counsel, people looking in, and they married someone who was saying, you know, and pretending to be someone they weren't. The character wasn't there. And I think both stories are wonderful, because then you can say, all right, I know what it can look like, and I know what it shouldn't look like. How can I give my heart to God and wise counsel to make a really, really wise decision here? Because we definitely go back and forth here. We say date in every season, 12 months to really get to know someone. And then you guys got engaged after.
And then you guys come in and wreck that.
Yeah. So who's right? Some pastors on Instagram, like Noah Heron, I love him. One of my greatest friends, amazing pastor. He says 6 months. And then Gary Thomas says 12 months. So
we were 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My parents were 2 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
Well, but that's not a good example.
Well, I mean,
Well, you know what's crazy is like the 50s and 60s. I've been doing so much research on this. 2 weeks was about the average.
So
and
wild,
then
yeah.
now it's 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Which is
Right.
obviously, you know, even longer than we're saying.
Yeah, 2.5
but-
years is wild.
so which one's best?
Right. Or like what's going on, I think, even with our world, that makes sense of why sometimes it was easier to get to know someone and why it's harder. And you even alluded to this, is like people put on fronts. It's easier to masquerade like online. Like, how do you guys help each other? How do you help other people really either ask the hard questions or like go through those seasons? Like, are there almost like a ladder of, maybe we don't know the exact timeline, but we know we should bring them around family, be around their friends.
Totally. Well, we have slightly different opinions here. Do you want to go first?
I would just say the biggest piece I think that's missing in today's culture is the wise counsel piece. And so the problem with hearing maybe a story like y'all's, I'm not saying your story is like a bad influence.
We're problems.
No, no. But I mean, the only issue is, let's say somebody hears that story and they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I want to know from the first date, and then like have an expedited timeline. Some people might hear that, and yet they're walking around with a lot of brokenness, not a lot of healing, and no wise counsel. You know, and what I mean by wise counsel is older people that are speaking into your life, not just your friends, or not just your parents. So sometimes your parents are awesome wise counsel. Sometimes they're not, and that's really hard to admit, that sometimes, even though we love them, they might not be actually the wisest counsel for having a godly relationship. And sometimes they are. But sometimes, you know, if those people don't have wise counsel, they are going to do what Scott Kadersha calls submarining. So they're going to be like, this is amazing. God is really speaking to us. God is telling us this is awesome. So much in common, so many things. And they're going to go underneath the surface like a submarine. Nobody has eyes. Nobody is communicating to them. Nobody's watching them. Nobody's being invited in. And then they just pop back up and they're like, we're engaged. God told us it's amazing. And you're like, okay, like that. And it could be. The thing that it is when you don't have wise counsel around you, I think that's the biggest thing. Wise counsel speaking into their life. Back in the day, like they had more people involved in the process. Now we're in this digital era where you can go on a Hinge date and nobody even knows that you're talking to this person or meeting up with them. And so we have to be more intentional to have that wise counsel and accountability. And I do think that's a really big factor that's missing, which is why I'm like, hey, I don't feel as comfortable advising people on a shorter timeline, because what I see and the amount of people we coach one-on-one, they don't have those systems. Yeah. They don't have the wise counsel. They have a lot of healing to do. And therefore, they're kind of relying just on their intuition, which sometimes isn't very good.
Yeah. And I think what I'm imagining for someone that's like, okay, well, how do I do this? It's almost like this idea of, okay, if you do have a good relationship where you do know or you do have peace, why not let it be tested, right? Like if you don't have anything to hide or you do have peace, just be like, okay, bring it in. And if someone brings a red flag, then you can be like, okay, well, let's weigh this out together and with other people, right? Like you don't have to just get one yes from a wise counselor, be like, all right, we're good to go. We got our marriage certificate, or one no means it's a detriment.
Exactly.
Even with us knowing quickly, we wanted input, because I'm like, despite me knowing and having peace and getting excited that I feel like God's heard my prayers, he's brought this person, I don't want to regret that a year, 10 years down the road. And so we brought friends in, we brought mostly our parents too. And when John and Lisa were like, hey, we're so excited for you. What kind of ring would you like? I want to help my son look. I was like, okay, if you have peace about this, that makes me feel better about my judgment. But my dad was like, I don't know, maybe y'all should wait a year. Maybe you should move to Colorado first, live separately. Like he was so close to the situation where not that his counsel was wrong, but he was really emotionally invested. Yeah. So that was kind of like a no that we had to work through of, okay, well, we're hearing this. What is leading to our yes? What's leading to our no? And I'm so glad you say to have multiple counsels, because it's so intricate of, your dad might not want to lose his little girl, or your best friend might not want to lose her best friend. So you could get no's for the wrong reasons. You could get yeses because people are scared to ruffle feathers. So I think that's great advice. Have a lot of people speaking in, and then just be open, because if it is from God, it's going to work out.
Why would it not be open to being challenged? If it's really from God and it's wise, and that's why would multiple wise counselors who also know God very well and are very, very wise, meaning they've seen lots of relationships in their time, come to the table and say no if it really is something good? That is such a good story, because I think about your dad and I'm like, well, honor your father and mother, and it's like, what, his father and mother are saying yes, mine's saying slow down, and I trust my dad and I also trust them. And so you can have a little bit of conflicting opinions, and that's okay, in the sense of I really think that's where being wise is listening to all counsel and then kind of deciphering at the end of the day. We always say run the triangle. Do you have peace with God? Do you have peace with the other person? And do you have peace with wise counsel? Yeah. And running that triangle as far as making big decisions in your life can really be a great, I don't want to say safety net, but just process. Because Proverbs is so clear. 17 times God talks about he speaks through wise counsel. The multitude of wise counselors, victory comes from the multitude of wise counselors. And so that is probably the most key component, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year. For me, the biggest thing is, because you get JP's advice in this kind of conversation, I don't care, find the godliest person you know and marry them.
Just like, hey, anybody will work.
And we're like, whoa. But I think in that definition, the godliest people I know.
What if they're already married?
That might be tough. I know this state called Utah.
Oh my goodness, JJ, stop.
But the godliest people I know are also humble enough to know that they don't know everything. Right. And they have really amazing people around them.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I'm glad we hit on that at length, because I do think that's the most important takeaway that you guys could have from either of us is, there's some good advice out there, but wisdom trumps that, and it comes in different ways. And similar to how God will speak to the husband and speak to the wife, and you have to be able to do that dance and have peace with it. Why not start that in your dating by listening to other people too? Yeah. I have some other topics that I feel like we have to talk about. Okay, the first one, dating unequally yoked. What are your thoughts?
This is a great question. Well, you actually answered. You go into this.
Are you sure you got it?
Yeah. No, you go.
No, you can try it out.
No, you.
Do you guys have like specialty questions? Like if somebody asks this, you answer it,
defer?
and then
Yeah.
Arden has like his question. Like, oh, I got this.
Anything I don't feel confident in, I just get started. But maybe we even describe what equally yoked means to someone.
Definitely one of the most misinterpreted verses in the whole Bible. And I actually love Addison and Julie's story, or even your parents-in-law story, because people definitely think about it. And what you think and hope is a healthy way, mature with mature, equally yoked. You think about two oxen pulling a yoke in the field, and they're both big, muscular, and strong in their own ways. Really what it means, though, is they're the same species. Meaning you don't have an oxen and then a mule, because they're going to hurt each other, and that plow is going to go nowhere. And everyone's going to hurt from this situation. So what it really means is it's the same species, meaning you're both believers. Now, the maturity piece of that, I think that's really interesting, because I do think it's maybe more wise to marry someone who's mature and like currently cultivating their faith. You don't want to be their pastor, in the sense of you kind of want them to demonstrate that humility, teachability, willingness to own and grow on their own, or else you're just going to be the one maybe nagging them or encouraging them or begging them or pleading with them in marriage. So there's definitely the idea of, are they just simply a believer? Okay, you're the same species. And then from that point, it's maybe a little bit more nuance of, okay, well, how mature are they in that sense? But, I was very surprised when I first heard your parents-in-law story and even Julie and Addison's. I was like, wait a second, that's not what I heard growing up, especially about being equally yoked.
Or you'd expect seeing them now even.
Totally.
Right,
So
exactly.
it's really amazing to just see over decades what God can do with that spirit of just, openness and humility and cultivating something special with you two. And even then, I just think about how it's just not guaranteed. I think about all these, what I would say baby boomer marriages that are probably coming to an end now after 20 and 30 years. And they were both pretty mature, pretty born again. And yet their lives after 2 or 3 decades are not more sanctified, more holy, more intimate. They've just kind of been surviving the whole time. So nothing's really guaranteed by the maturity of their faith right now. And I think that's a part of making that decision that can be daunting or hard, is you really don't know what their spirit and soul is going to look like in 30 years from now.
Yeah.
I agree. I think what's interesting and what I see in our community is a lot of people hyper focus on so many specifics. So let's say I'm charismatic, Bethel background, and a guy is interested in me that goes to JP's church, Baptist, and they're like, I can't do that, because for me that wouldn't feel equally yoked, because they don't
Like
know
doctrine or expression.
and not even just expression mainly, because I get it, Catholic would be a different story, but believe in the same things except for how the Holy Spirit shows up. That's where they can be really hyper focused on what equally yoked means for some people is, they have to be a charismatic, they have to speak in tongues, they have to raise the flag, like be waving flags during worship. And if they
That's Kate,
can't
by the way.
do that, if they don't do that, I can't be with them, because that would be unequal. And that's where I would challenge people. I'm like, hey, maybe you should be a little bit more open than that, because JJ and I, we don't agree on every single thing when it comes to faith. There's certainly things that we debate, even biblically, which I think is totally okay. Not in terms of what the Bible says, but like some maybe principles that come out of it, not the foundational pieces. And so I think that's where I think some people hold the equally yoked as they have to be a Christian just as long as I've been a Christian. They have to have the exact expression of faith as I do. Because it's so important to me, if they don't speak in tongues, if they're not charismatic, I can't date them.
Yeah.
I would be curious your thoughts.
Well, first of all, JJ, thank you for alluding to our other episodes. If you are new here, we've had
They're
Scott,
great.
John, Julie. But clearly, my in-laws, sister-in-law and parent-in-law, both their background was the male was in a faith relationship, like had known God and kind of had to help bring the other one to that point.
Yeah.
But both of them, I would say my biggest advice on equally yoked is that happened during the dating period. Like people talk about dating to convert and things like that. I personally would not enter into like a committed marriage unless I knew we are on mission together. It's okay if we're not as mature or like haven't been Christians as long, but I need to know, one, I'm not trying to get you to sign up for something that you're not ready to do, because that's actually hindering you.
Yeah.
But then also, like, are we going to be on the same page with how we raise our kids? So I think that is really important, and we shouldn't shy away from asking those questions in dating. We shouldn't judge with them, but we shouldn't also just make excuses.
Yeah.
I like that you said that there are disagreements, and I mean, we see that in the Bible with apostles and people that are like, okay, this is great, I still love you, and we're going to spread the gospel, but I'm going to go spread it here this way.
Paul and Peter, it was amazing to just read. They weren't perfectly aligned. Mm-hmm. And these are like two of the most legendary apostles in the faith.
Yeah.
But I think, speaking of flirting to converting, did you have that chapter in your history? Because I certainly did. And it never went well, or as well as it did for maybe some of your neighbors down the street. You call family.
You're saying not with each other, but in previous situationships.
I converted Kate. No,
she was speaking. She was doing great. But I was like, hey, actually, let's talk about that. Yeah, I have my first really long relationship was that, and I knew it going in.
Yeah.
And I think almost always with those situations, but you like tell yourself, especially for women, it's like, oh, well, maybe he just needs this part that I bring to his life.
Right,
and,
exactly.
Like the style.
Yeah, the style and the faith. We can, everything else is good.
You're like, I can fix that.
I think honestly what's hard for me back in that season, and maybe someone can relate watching this, is I saw so much goodness in that person that I was like, man, if you could just understand, one, like how much God loves you and what that relationship actually could do for your life, like you could be an awesome partner. But the hard part is like, we can't actually get someone to see that. We can, introduce them. We can walk them through it the same way my in-laws did. But like, it's up to them to make that first commitment. And that really does impact how they're going to commit to you. And unfortunately, I learned that the hard way. Yeah. I talked myself into it. And for me, this doesn't happen for everyone. It actually brought me down lower. Because I was like, oh yeah, I'm strong enough to lead someone. But in my opinion, especially if the guy is not there, like maybe you do help introduce him to Christ, but if he's not ready to make that decision, he can't be the leader of your home. And if he's not, that brings so many challenges, because he's stewarding this vision for your life. And if it's something contrary to the word, you're gonna be subscribed to that. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true.
I can't think of a more sad situation that plays out time and time again.
Yeah, it's so true.
That you have to witness. A man who can't even lead himself well is given the responsibility of leading a wife and a family. And it just almost never goes well, barring a miracle. And typically there's just so much pain in that marriage that's causing him to be in couples therapy or therapy, and he doesn't even want to be there. That's the whole point. He's having to be in these situations where he has to change, and he never really had the heart to want to change in the first place. So he's just being forced to do it, and he's just going to resent you. It's performative. It's white-knuckled. And that's one of the harder things to see. And that's why, green flag, like our number one green flag, I think that we both just harp on is just humility.
Teachability,
humility. Well, and humility leads to teachability. Right. It's the humility to say that I don't have all the answers. I do need help. And I need people. And
I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get it, to get the help that I need.
Yeah.
Because you might have some people that admit faults, but then they don't do anything about it. And that's nice. It's like, okay, you have the self-awareness to admit that you have a flaw.
That's half.
Step one, that's great. But then they never take the steps to actually change too, which I think is a big part of that piece as well.
I'm just an Enneagram 2. I can't help it. It's who I am. I'm aware, but that's good insight. Hopefully no one is in that season, but if so, please talk to someone. Please go back to that wisdom factor. There's another thing I want to see where we think about this is living together before. I feel like that naturally comes out of maybe you're dating someone you're not equally yoked with. They want to live together. They want to maybe push some boundaries. What are y'all's thoughts?
I think we're probably on the same page. We're absolutely a no-go on that. And we would go so far as to even say, don't stay in the same room together. Don't stay in the same bed. And we also coach a lot of people that of all ages, but some people who are like 38, 40, and they're like, well, Kate, like, you don't get it. Like, I'm older. Like, that's like maybe boundaries for like a 22-year-old,
Yeah, the rules don't
20-year-old.
apply
But
to
like,
me,
we
yeah.
can go on a trip and stay in the same hotel and stay in the same bed, and it's fine.
We're adults.
Yeah, we're adults. Like, you don't get it. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I would actually recommend, no, don't do that. And, you know, it's just not a wise decision, in my opinion, if you are trying to honor boundaries of waiting for marriage. And even then, I would say, I mean, I'm just now going into this sleeping in the same room together, sleeping in the same bed. Like, that's a very sacred thing.
I thought you meant y'all just now starting to do that.
I know we are.
I was like, y'all have a daughter. You're not.
We just spent the night
For the first time last
How
night.
was
a
it?
few months ago. And,
He elbowed me multiple times.
yeah, I was sleepwalking the other night.
Actually, he was, which is funny. But I would say, you know, that's something very sacred that I would totally recommend waiting till your wedding night.
Well, but again, what's the Bible verse telling you not to do that?
Well, I mean, anything regarding purity, if we're actually...
Well, yeah, but even then, it's like, there's really maybe one verse in Scripture, do not give off the appearance of evil. Meaning, if you're sleeping in the same
be
bed...
pure of heart. I mean, there's lots of purity.
Yeah, but there's not a specific, and that's where people trip up, right? Living together is probably more clear. I mean, if you're living together and not having sex, then, I mean... that for me, JP says, if you sleep in the same bed together and your boyfriend doesn't want to have sex with you, you should be offended. You know, so
That's so funny.
But again, you know, I think the whole call here is to wisdom and honoring maybe the sanctity and preserving of intimacy. While there's maybe not the most clear verses in the Bible, you think about something like waking up in the morning together. That for me, out of intimacy, is something I just want to preserve as much for marriage as possible. I only want to have that with one person. Those morning cuddles, the late night pillow talk. That for me, it was super sacred. I'd never really shared that with a girl until marriage.
Yeah.
And because I was so beautiful, the idea of that to me was just so sacred and beautiful. I just couldn't wait for it. And I also didn't want to maybe squander it. Now, a lot of people are hearing that, well, I've squandered it, so it's gone. No, you're not getting it. There's nothing but mercy and grace to cover anything. And more importantly, I'd say a lot of people hear these conversations, especially around sex and crossing any kind of boundary and say, okay, well, I have shame now. I'm useless. I gave that away and I'm never going to get it back. And I think the truth couldn't be more far from that. Meaning you've experienced something, but you haven't really experienced the beauty of marriage and covenant. Waking up to someone in that morning and you know, because of a promise they made, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I love that, especially as a woman too.
Yeah.
Like
and think about cohabitation. I just could cry because I'm like, man, so sad because especially maybe as a woman, you see you are constantly having to market yourself, sell yourself, limit yourself. You can't really be you.
Yeah.
You can't really bring all of your emotions and cry and be yourself and ask because you're performing.
Yeah.
And you might be too needy and you might scare them off.
Yeah.
And that for me is heartbreaking because then you're giving all the benefits of relationship without the responsibility being taken up. And so that for me is like more than just the science and the data, which is like all says this is a bad idea and it doesn't work.
Look up for yourself if you don't believe us.
Yeah. More importantly, I'm just like, man, what a sad situation to be.
Yeah.
You know, for all parties, but especially the one who is constantly feeling they have to sell themselves and can't be themselves. I just think about how unsafe that feels. Yeah. You don't really know the true safety of covenant and getting in a fight and it gets messy and bad. And now you have to wonder if it's over. And that's why the covenant of marriage is so amazing in sickness and in health and in depression and burnout. And I'm not being myself. And this is a hard season and we're going through, you know, a lot of suffering and pain. And I know that you're going to be with me.
Yeah. I think that's so true. Like the grace, I think, is actually needed to go from the moments of we're low, we're fighting. It's like, what is our tether to get back? And it's that commitment.
Yeah, it's a covenant.
It's the grace. And you even mentioned that there's not really Bible verses of, well, don't share a bedroom together or don't live together. But we have to think of the context too. Like the context way back when people weren't saying, we need to test drive before you buy the car. They were saying, live together for a couple years, be engaged for 10 years. So I think it was just more well known of you live with your parents, and then when you get married, you separate from them and you're joined together. Like that was way more understood back then. But now people are hearing, well, how do you know they're the one? How do you know if you're going to be attracted to them if you don't have intimacy first? Yeah. So I think it's harder now. We have to really tune out a lot more and go back to what we believe.
Yes.
But I think of the amount of couples, and you mentioned the research, when you look into it, people that live together and go through some of those harder seasons before they're committed, they break up so much more often because you don't have that covering. And that's what you're saying, JJ. I can't imagine, you can relate, Kate, but having a child, bringing them home when you're not sleeping, it's a new season for both of you. You don't necessarily feel beautiful.
Yeah.
But then when you know I am safe enough to share these emotions with the husband that loves me and our child, committed to me and our child, who can look at me when I'm wearing like disposable underwear and say, you're so beautiful.
Yes.
And just know it's out of a purity of their heart. And there's something to that I'm like, I know it's tempting to want to cling to this relationship and like get all from someone, but it's so much more worth the wait to wait until you can give your heart to someone that's ready to receive it. Yeah. And I wish I had the numbers pulled up, but there's even research on the way that men can go from relationship to relationship and really not feel much, but once they're committed to someone, it's like this tethering like they've never felt. I don't know if you can provide the anecdotal response to that, but...
Well, I have heard of yellow cab theory lately. Have you heard of this one? It's basically men will go from experience to experience, relationship, dating, whatever it is. There's something that happens where they see a girl and it's basically they say, okay, I'm ready. And they step out and they call the cab and they get in. And there's nothing that you can do until a man is ready to call that taxi and commit to get him to that point.
Well, and that's actually, and part of our vows and part of our story and is what I would say as a woman who might be listening, wait for a man whose heart is ignited for you. I prayed years ago before I met JJ, like for a man's heart who really is ignited to just really commit to pursue me through the good, bad, and ugly, even though he might probably eventually see some things that are still broken, I'm still healing. And JJ, actually years before he met me, you can tell the story, but he started praying that same prayer, which is crazy because we prayed that same thing for our hearts to be ignited for the one that God had for us and at different times. And that's what I felt like with him for the first time, because 3 months into our relationship, I started going through a really hard season of depression, burnout, all these things, and was like very new for me because I'd never gone through that before. And for most guys, they'd be like, yeah, okay, this is cool. It was all fun. The infatuation felt good. Now we're kind of out of infatuation. Real life is happening. She's got a lot of emotions. This isn't what I thought it would be, and I'm out. And instead for him, because I really did feel like his heart was ignited, he made that choice. He stayed with me. He pursued health, drew towards me versus being drawn away. And I think for somebody who's dating, and it wasn't because I was selling myself or trying to keep him or prove to him like that proving
it's like the
energy.
opposite, actually.
Yeah, if anything, I was like kind of repelling him. I was in a bad place, if I'm being honest. I wasn't in my best spot. And he still was like, no, I'm going to pursue this girl, even if she's kind of ugly right now. Not like physically, hopefully, but well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I was.
What do you look like when you cry?
Yeah, there you go. There were lots of...
She's not a pretty crier, but
let's just say,
I'm just kidding.
During that time, I took JJ to Disney for the first time he'd never been, and it was definitely not the happiest day of his life.
It's a terrible day.
It was probably our biggest argument.
We had a terrible fight there, the idea of ignition is really awesome because it's from Song of Solomon. Do not stir up love before it's time to awaken. And you could argue like it's physically, like don't turn on your body with someone until it's time to turn it on and have sex. But I also think there's probably some spiritual, advice there too, meaning don't God, like, please don't stir up my heart for someone until it's time. If you subscribe, and I really wrestle with, free will versus God's will and the idea of the one. I like some people, their pendulum constantly swings back and forth. Like, is it divine? Is it sovereign? Is there a one? Or are we kind of maybe over spiritualizing it and God gives you free will to choose and it's much more pragmatic? That's where like JP is one of our favorite teachers, and he was very much here, and now he's like maybe the most pragmatic teacher when it comes to dating, meaning find the godliest person you can and choose. And there's no such thing as the one. The only one that exists is the one that you choose. And what I do know to be true is whatever the answer is, whether it is divine and sovereign or is very pragmatic, what I do love is at the end of the day, you still have to choose. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And once you make your choice, whether it was free will or God's will, once you make it, you're signing exactly. Yes. And a lot of times, Tim Keller has some great, theology sermons on like singleness. And he always says, you always marry the wrong one. Mm-hmm. Meaning at some point, at some time, years, you always meet someone who has something that you wanted that your spouse doesn't, and you could say, they're the right one.
Or at least you think they have.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in some ways, you could always marry the wrong one, and that attitude is meaning you've made your choice, not sleep in your bed, but work at it with all your heart, and more importantly, take ownership, for the person in the mirror instead of constantly focusing on them, which is a whole nother topic. But yeah, I'd say at that point, I really look back and I'm like, maybe it's a combination of God's ignition in my heart. I was really infatuated with Kait. Some people could say like, we see like the baby bird syndrome, meaning like some people have this savior complex where it feels good. Mm-hmm. You find a little baby bird with a broken wing. It feels really good, to be helping. And there's a lot of significance that comes from that. So whether it's a combination of all those, I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I do know is I think at the end of the day, God gave me a lot of peace to stay when a lot of other signs probably said to go.
Mm-hmm. And that was intentional.
Yeah.
For y'all, for your relationship. Mm-hmm. I think if you're probably watching this thinking, well, I don't really have clear answers on anything besides don't live together. But if I'm going to boil down what we've all shared, it's, bring counsel in, have peace, don't kid yourself or the other person. I feel like if I could speak for you guys, our best advice would be just know who you are and what you're looking for, not in a superficial way, but in a spiritual lens. Yeah. That's something that my husband Arden shares all the time is like, pray for God to give you the spiritual eyes to see them, not as like, okay, well, I want to see this person, God, bring like Mr. Handsome to my doorstep, but like give me the eyes to see, wow, this is the person that I want to go through the trenches with. Yeah. This is the person that I'm actually able to do. I'm back and forth a little bit on the one too, but I'm like, I know that there's something where God puts us with people that are going to sharpen us when friction happens, and it's going to be for the better because no one's perfect. No spouse is perfect, but you can actually find strength out of trial if you're committed on the same vision. I love having this conversation. I wish we could go for another hour, but technically we can because I'm going to come on y'all's podcast.
Yes. It's going to be so good.
So if you're watching this, be sure to check out Heart of Dating. Where's the best place for them to find you and connect with you guys?
Yeah, you guys can go to heartofdating.com. Find us on Instagram, Heart of Dating. Our podcast is everywhere on YouTube as well, which is so fun. And of course, Spotify is another big place to see it. So,
well, we'll see. I mean, one of us has to delete the podcast after
this. Oh, that's true. That's true.
You might not be able to find us.
Maybe it's the Heart of the Future Husband is the new channel.
Merged.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.